Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it.
Wow.
It's funny, isn't it? Some people you know a lot about, they have high profile, and you almost kind of know their story before you hear their story. But speaking to Jeff, he's somebody who has kind of, I think you were saying, kind of was like slipped below the radar.
Yeah,
but
I think he should be called Jeff under the radar.
But what tremendous success and so modest.
I tell you what, in a world of instant gratification, I'm going to sound a bit like an old bloke here, but in a world of instant gratification, YouTube, Instagram influencer, blah, 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 if you ever wanted almost to say, just try hard work and overcome some of the adversities that you've been presented with, listen to Jeff's story.
Yeah, and also I think it shows that for people who feel that you need to put ticks in those boxes, you don't need to, because he's had tremendous success. And hearing his tough start and his upbringing and what his primary driver was to be a dentist, it's a fascinating story.
And I think what's interesting, that, you know, the thing that influenced him as a child on the dentistry bit, you'll have to listen to find out what that was, affects the way that he runs his practices now.
But also a real visionary, his views on cryptocurrency and where that could be in the future. But I was also, it was very nice of him to say how valuable he finds the podcast, and how he says about, you know, there's lots of courses, but this really strikes to the core of the business of dentistry. And we know a lot of people listen to it, and if people can subscribe, that's great. It will get to a wider audience, or if they can share it with other people, because genuinely we do this because the more people that can learn from others, the better.
And we just think about it, two blokes chatting to some really interesting people.
We're lucky guys.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
So here we are again
for another one.
Yeah, and they keep coming in.
They do.
This week, very excited, talking to Dr Jeff Sherer, the owner of the dental design studio group of 19 dental practices across the UK. 19.
Big up to Jeff.
Absolutely, but also somebody who's written lots of articles, interested in the business of dentistry, has views on the metaverse, a crypto pioneer.
Yeah. Interesting.
So there's lots of leading edge thinking going on that we can dig into. So I'm really looking forward to this chat. So welcome, Jeff. How are you doing?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Morning. Nice to see you guys. Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I'm a big fan of it, and I think what you guys are doing is really good. I definitely need more of these sorts of things happening in the dental space.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you for that. Yeah.
I mean,
we enjoy it. I think that's the most important thing. We have a bit of a laugh.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones that for us, you know, we look to find guests who we know are interesting and have a great story to tell. And if other people tune in and enjoy that, then that's absolutely fabulous. And yeah, we get people listening to it, we get good feedback. So it's obviously working, and I think people are genuinely interested in people and their stories, but also through each and every episode, there's always some nuggets. There's always little nuggets where people take it and go, so that's how Jeff did it, or that was a turning point for Jeff, or whatever it might be. So yeah, just hearing your story today will be fabulous. And
it's great for us, isn't it? We get to interview people that we really like, that are really interesting. We're sitting here learning about people. It's just like having a chat with someone. It's great. It's almost like best job in the world, really, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yeah, so no, we're very fortunate. We appreciate your time today as well.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. We've never met, but I'm very familiar with you, and we're familiar with you and your work, and you're obviously quite frequent contributor online. I enjoy your tweets. Some of them make me laugh an awful lot. And you're not shy in terms of putting yourself forward in front of the media as well, which is great, because it means that they're interested in what you've got to say. You have quite strong opinions, particularly on the NHS side of things. So it'd be nice to get your views on that. But before we get into that, as I understand, you qualified as a dentist back in 2000. Up in Leeds, but you're not a native Yorkshireman. You were originally from the US, is that right?
That's it. I was born in Chicago. grew up there. I came to UK when I was 12 years old. My family, we emigrated. My mum's actually from England, and my dad was from America. It was actually a pretty tough childhood in some of the ways, because my dad worked abroad for a few years, so I didn't have like a sort of like father figure all the time. And in terms of on that same theme, we also had unemployment in the house at times, and I saw that firsthand as a kid growing up, where there was like arguments between my mum and dad about how the bills were going to get paid and that side of things. And in a way, I suppose that was probably one of the things that prompted me to get into dentistry. It wasn't so much that I knew that I wanted to do dentistry, but I just realized I wanted to do something where I wouldn't be unemployed and have a situation where I could provide for my family. And so what actually happened was, when I was at school, we had something called Course Finder 2000. And it was called Course Finder 2000 because at that time, the year 2000 was this like mega event that was coming.
Oh, so this mythical day when the world was going to end.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
I think for people that were
basically
I was going to say, I think for people that are too young for it was called the Millennium Bug, wasn't it? Where all processes and anything that had a computer chip was going to reset to zero and the world was going to crumble.
That's it.
Again, the dark ages.
That's it. So I did Course Finder 2000, which basically asked me a million questions about, like, do you prefer working outside? Do you prefer working inside? What do you like? Do you like using tools? Do you like all sorts of different things? And then it brought up a list of different careers and courses that you could do, and one of them was dentistry. And
was that in the UK, Jeff?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah,
right.
So I did my GCSEs.
Can I just wind back
here
to the immigration from the US to the UK? So what was that facilitated? Was that because of economy, jobs for your dad, or something like that?
Yeah, basically, it was two things really. One was my dad got a job in the UK, and my mum was from England, so she was kind of homesick anyway. So it was kind of those two things. Funnily enough, actually, my dad's line of work was computers, but it was before computers were sort of like what they are now and sexy and all singing, dancing. It was like basically before Steve Jobs even made the first Apple computer, so nobody really knew much about computers in those days. So it was quite hard for him sort of getting involved in that, and that's what prompted us to come to the UK.
I just think it's a fascinating parallel. You know, it's a fascinating parallel that a number of our guests have emigrated from India, Iraq, Iran to Denmark to Sweden, you know, coming over to the UK, and somehow you don't think emigration from the US to the UK. But you came over. Yeah. It's a real interesting sort of like dynamic, isn't it? You sort of think, why would you go from the US to the UK and emigrate? But it's an interesting one when it's almost something you don't imagine happening. Yeah, they're fascinating.
Sure, it was really funny because the UK was like really in some ways quite behind the US. So like just a couple of things that I found was strange was like all the TV programs were like 6 months behind the episodes that I was watching in America. And when you went to the petrol station, they had leaded petrol, and that was something that we hadn't seen in America for like never. And so the UK was quite different. And I remember one of my first memories of coming to the UK is we went to a restaurant and I ordered a lemonade, and I was expecting it to be one of those like old-fashioned sort of like lemonades with the lemon in it and sort of like
cloudy or whatever.
Grandma used to make it. Yeah, that's it. And then when it came, it was this like clear, fizzy sort of like 7-Up style drink, and I was just like, oh, this country is real bad, and it's like I want to go home. But I obviously we stuck with it and gradually sort of got involved in education, going to school, got settled, and then we found somewhere to live. and then went on that journey, really.
What was it like, Jeff, coming over as a 12-year-old? Because you'd be sort of into that. Would that be about year 7 or 8 or something?
Yeah,
so you probably ended up on coming in where some people had already formed friendship groups. So you sort of end up parachuting in from the US with a funny accent and different views on things. What was that like, sort of, for you?
Yeah, it was really hard, actually. Firstly, I wasn't very good at school. I struggled all the way through school. I was always in the bottom set for maths, for English. I think I was dyslexic, but in those days, nobody ever knew what dyslexia was. It wasn't something that was like tested for. So I struggled with my writing, and a lot of the kids in the UK had learned French for a bit. You know, they had been studying French. I hadn't learned a word of French. So it was really hard for me. And I found that I felt sort of up against it from the get-go. And in a way, I suppose that kind of also sort of helped to shape my mentality and lead on to things, because the reality is I was a step behind everybody else, and the only way to sort of get there was I didn't have the sort of any greater intelligence or smarter than anybody else, but the only things I could do to sort of bring myself level was to sort of apply myself and work hard to try and catch up and get myself to the level. And the truth is that I always found academic and education side of things really difficult. Even when I was at university, there was people who were at university with me, absolute geniuses. They would like get sort of like, they were constantly getting distinctions, and I was like, if I got 50% in the pass, that for me was like getting 100%. I was just pleased to move on to the next year. My first year of dental school, I struggled. I had to do a couple of resets. I spent the whole summer resitting anatomy and bio and physiology, a couple of subjects that I failed in the first year exams. And all my friends were going to Ibiza, having great summers, and I was sitting there in the family living room looking at pictures of skulls and learning the cranial nerves. And
Wow.
it was really like it was tough for me, definitely like that. But one thing I had, and one thing that sort of stayed with me, is that I had a sense of I wanted to make it. I had a sense of determination. I really, really wanted to do it. And teachers at school were saying, no, dentistry is not for you. You're not going to make it.
Really?
You should consider doing something else. And they said it to me, like straight up said it to me that you know, we don't think you can do it. And that for me was like, in a way, probably the best thing that could happen, because that really put the fire in me, and it made me think like, I'm gonna really do this. And throughout my studies and throughout my career, I would say the two things that I've had is, one is determination, and the other is just plain old-fashioned hard work. And what I found is that if you're really determined to do something and you're prepared to put in the hard work behind it, you'll get to whatever your goals is, whatever it is, whether it's qualifying as a dentist or running the marathon or whatever your challenges are. And that's something that I always backed myself. I always believed in myself, even though I struggled. I saw it really as a challenge, and that was the motivation to move forward. And
Jeff,
there's
would
been
you
lots
say
of
that?
lots of times.
Yeah, sorry, I just think based on you saying that, for where we are in sort of 2022 now, would you say what you just described is becoming quite an old-fashioned, almost outdated attitude of, you know, work hard, take your time, you know, really master what you're doing, and it will take time. It won't be overnight, because there's a feeling that there's kind of this desire, this urgency for overnight success. Yeah, everybody wants to kind of, you know, get to where they want to be tomorrow instead of next year or over a 10-year period. Whereas you've shown that kind of needing that resilience and that hard work, it doesn't happen immediately. And we're going to come on to your practices and the success you've had there in a minute. But it just feels that I think people could take a lot from that, which is you do have to work hard. Things don't happen and just fall in your lap, because there are lots of people, and like I say, I think that the way the media works these days doesn't particularly help, where it appears that you kind of have
Like become an Instagram influencer.
Success seems to happen overnight, and people don't always speak so openly as you just have about the hard work that's needed to get to the level that you're at.
Sure. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, truth be told, obviously we'd all like to get from A to B as quickly and successfully as we can. But the reality is that to achieve anything in life, my feeling is you do have to put in effort. There isn't a lot of things that come easy. There are people that have good fortune, they win the lottery or something happens. There's some kind of turn of events that means that they achieve their level of success very quickly. But I would say for the majority of people, it comes down to just sort of focusing, grafting, doing your best. And in a way, for me, that I think is part of the enjoyment of it as well, is the journey of it. If I had done all the things I had done really easily and hadn't had to work for it, what would be the satisfaction in that? I don't think there would be. And a lot of times when you reminisce and you think about the challenges that you had to overcome, that's where that sort of sense of satisfaction comes from. Certainly more so than like where maybe I've done a dental treatment and made a nice profit on that dental treatment. Okay, that's nice, but the reality is that's not really what you remember. What you remember is the sort of like the bridges that you've had to get over in order to get to that position like that.
I think you're right. I think you're right. We always say sometimes a little knockback is not a bad thing. We remember when we first bought Frank Taylor's, which where we are now is nearly 22 years ago. And everything we touched turned to gold until one thing turned to shit. Do you remember? We launched one thing and it just didn't work. It didn't cost us a huge amount of money. It didn't make us bankrupt, but it was a really good lesson. The fact of just because Andy and I thought it was a great idea, it doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be a great idea. And it was good because we had it within the first 3 years, I think, of owning the business, and up until then everything we'd done had worked. We did this one thing and it just didn't work.
But often I think those real deep life lessons come from failure. I think if things just keep going well, you don't learn anything like as much as you do if something goes wrong. And from that, we still talk about that now, and this is something that happened nearly 20 years ago, but we still refer back to it because it was such a valuable lesson. Before we move on to the practice side of things, Jeff, just going back to this Course Finder 2000 program that you went through when you were at school, out of interest, what else did that throw up alongside dentistry? What were the other career options that it suggested your way?
So basically it took the A-levels that you were doing at the time, and it used that because it assumed that obviously you were doing those A-levels because you that was something you enjoyed and you liked. So one of my A-levels was theology because I was quite interested in that at the time, and so it had a real range of different things. So it had things like aeronautical engineering, biochemistry, marine biology, church garden maintenance, all sorts of different.
With a theology degree, we could be talking to the Reverend Jeff Sherer.
So of the choices that were presented to you, is there any family history in dentistry? What was the reason that sort of piqued your interest?
So there wasn't nobody in my family has any sort of medical background like that. I think what it was is from my own experience of childhood again of the dentist. Funnily enough, when I was growing up as a kid, I had really my teeth were a real mess. My front teeth stuck out massively, and kids used to call me Bugs Bunny because my teeth were so proclined. And then I saw a dentist who actually took the time. I was really scared of the dentist as well. I used to run out of the dental surgery. This is absolute honest truth. My mum used to take me to the orthodontist, and they'd say, right, you're going to have to wear this, and we're going to have to do some extractions. And I would run out of the dental practice, and my mum would be left there apologizing, saying, I'm so sorry. And she'd have to come find me in the car park. And eventually, we found a dentist who took the time and care with me and explained it, and he did the orthodontic treatment. And I saw the difference that made to my sort of like physical appearance and to my confidence.
That's
And I thought, wow, isn't that an amazing thing to be able to help people and do that? And that resonated with me really strongly. And that was probably one of the main reasons why I wanted to do dentistry like that, because of my own personal experiences of the dentist.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because that probably then is at the core of your 19 practices. You know, that the fact of that you can change people's lives has sort of spread into what you've done. I think it's fascinating. You know, from your own personal experience, that's where you've got that and want to give that to other people.
So Jeff, how long were you? How long were you an associate before you decided to dabble on the business side of things?
Yeah, so not very long really. So I did my, it was called VT in those days. I think now it's the foundation year. So I did my foundation year, and then I did 1 year as an associate, and then I set up my own practice. And the very first practice I set up was a squat practice. Luckily enough, I set it up with another dentist, Larry, who was quite an experienced dentist, and we set it up together. And that was like, my view at the time was just like, let's go for it, because if it goes wrong, I can always go back to being an associate. And it was quite interesting because the very first practice was a squat practice. So we didn't have any patients. We bought an old building that was like a sort of disused doctor's surgery. And there was other dental practices in the area. And I remember our accountant came to visit us, and he had a look around, and he goes, "Why are you doing this?" He goes, "You know, you basically..." He was like, "You guys are going to be bankrupt in like 6 months because of the fact that there's other dentists, and you're in a pretty affluent area. People who are here already have dentists and doctors and lawyers. They don't need you here. And you're setting up like a 5 surgery practice in the middle of a place that's already well like serviced by dentists."
And where was that one, Jeff?
That was in Northwood. That was in Middlesex. That was our first. Funny enough, as a side thing, that actually was my former doctor's surgery when I was a kid, and the doctors moved out, and it just sat there like abandoned for quite a few years.
I have this thing, Jeff, that I think naivety in business is really powerful. I think that quite often people that do things that in retrospect look outrageous is often born out of naivety. And it sounds, for lots of people listening to someone who's just done their VT foundation year, 1 year in as an associate, to set up a squat dental practice, that's a ballsy move. And it may well be that bit of naivety gave you that confidence to go ahead and do that. Because, I was going to say, we still speak to a lot of people today who like the idea of setting up a squat, but it's a very, very hard thing to do. And I think having a mentor, a more experienced partner with you would have, without doubt, helped. But it is still a hard thing to do. What year was that, Jeff? When did you do that?
So that was in 2004. That was the very first.
Okay, so that was before the NHS contract came in then.
I was thinking Jeff obviously deferred the Porsche purchase of most 1 year VTs. I've got money. Let me buy an expensive car.
What happened was I was doing, while the building works were going on, I was running my own domiciliary service. So I had a contract from the NHS for doing domiciliary work, and I was doing that, and that was basically like helping me to like make ends meet while we were waiting for the practice to open, because it took quite a long time to do all the building works and everything.
What a great story.
Oh yeah.
Anyone listening, this is what you have to do. Hard graft, roll up your sleeves, seek every opportunity.
But also, Jeff, going back to that beginning when you said about your father and not always having work and listening to your parents kind of, talk about how the bills are going to get paid. Was that always in the back of your mind when you were thinking about how you were going to secure your future in terms of transitioning yourself from being an associate to a business owner? Was that something that was kind of always there in the background?
I think that's right. I mean, certainly from my perspective, I didn't feel like I felt like, because I was still very young in dentistry, I could afford to take a risk, because if it didn't work out, I could always get a job working as I was as an associate. So I knew there was like that as a fallback plan if things didn't go right. But obviously when you start a new venture, when you start a squat practice, you really don't know what the future holds. And I didn't know whether it would be successful or not. The one thing I knew is that it wasn't going to not be successful because of a lack of hard work. That's for 100% sure. And that's one of the things that I completely dedicated myself to that. So I saw patients at like 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning, open till 8 o'clock at night, opening on a Saturday. Nobody local was open on a Saturday. So I worked Saturdays because that gave people, that was an opportunity to bring in new patients. And basically I knew that with hard work, there was no reason why it couldn't succeed. And thankfully it did succeed, and that kind of springboarded the opportunity for other practices to come from there. But had that practice for 5 years before I moved on to having another practice. So in that respect, it was like, that was really where I learned about running a practice, bringing a principle, what works, what didn't work, how to look after patients. And in terms of dentistry, I was still learning my trade myself because I was only a few years out of university. And so I was still getting to become a better clinician. I did some courses. I did a sedation course, started offering sedation to people, which was something that a lot of people didn't offer, and that brought patients. And one of the things that we did with the first practice, although now it's a bit more common, but at the time, the mentality was to set up like a sort of a one-size-fits-all clinic. And what I mean by that was like we brought in a periodontist, we brought in an orthodontist, we brought in an endodontist. So we had a general dental practice, but we had specialists working there as well. So if I saw a patient who needed a root canal, they could go over and see the endodontist, or if they wanted to have their teeth straightened, they could go and see the orthodontist.
I mean, back in those days, I was going to say, back in those days, it was way more common for that to be referred out as opposed to have those specialists in-house.
Exactly. So now you sort of see that more frequently, but at the time, people would have to be referred out for those things. And I just thought, why are we doing that? Because at the end of the day, we're sending patients to other practices where they don't really want to go because they don't know that practice. We're putting the revenue in other people's pockets. Why not have it in our own practice? And then patients can feel confident that they're here. And patients loved it because what would happen is patients would come in, they'd go in to see the endodontist. I'd pop in and see, is everything all right? Yeah, you're going to see the endodontist now. And patients felt comfortable because they were in an environment that they were already comfortable with.
Great continuity.
And from my perspective, I loved it because all the things I was rubbish at in dentistry, like root canals and perio, there was people who could do it much better than me.
But Jeff, as well, I think you're being very modest as well, because you said, I just work hard. It's through hard work. And we obviously see lots of practice owners and dentists, and hard work might get you 2, possibly 3 practices. But you're obviously a savvy business guy as well, because you didn't get 2 or 3, you didn't get 10. You've now got 19 practices in your group, which is significant. So what's kind of the magic sauce? What were those stepping stones from having that one practice for the first 5 years to going from there?
And before you answer that, so out of the ones that you've got, was the first a squat and then every other an acquisition, or sort of is it like a mixture of squat and acquisition in there?
Sure. So, I mean, it is really a mixture of things. I mean, some of the practices we bought, some of the practices won some competitive procurements. So we had the practice, but they were quite like modest practices, and then won competitive procurement. And actually, without going off too much of a tangent, competitive procurement is actually something that has been like a love-hate relationship of mine, because I've been fortunate enough to win a few competitive procurements, but I've also lost a lot as well. And I remember one of our early practices, I think it was our lowest off practice. It was like our 4th or 5th practice that we had. The opportunity came for a lot of UDAs. The dental contract was with Oasis, if you remember those guys. And the contract went out to procurement, and I I filled in all the application, and it was like completely different to what we knew as dentists, asking questions about sustainability and all sorts of like, I can't even explain all the questions, but they were like questions that as a dentist you would never ever even think about. And luckily enough, we won that contract. And but that was like the 10th procurement I had done. So I'd sat at home many hours, literally hundreds and hundreds of hours filling in procurements, late at night, early in the morning, missing family functions, not going to social things because I was working at a procurement. And then suddenly you get the email saying, sorry, you've been unsuccessful. And it was like, it was really tough. And I remember like the first few, I was so upset about it. I couldn't even read the feedback. And I just thought, you know what, somebody's done better than me. And that's, good luck to them. But I'm obviously not there. And I kept working at it and improving. And I started reading the feedback. And eventually on our 10th procurement, the 10th one I submitted, we won the procurement, and it was a good one. It was a big one. And that was really satisfying. So to answer your question, some of the practices have been practices that we bought, and some of the practices we bought and we've added to it by winning competitive procurements. But all the practices that, it was real tough there, because like the first one I did, I must have spent like 100 hours doing it.
Wow.
And I was still working at the time, so I was doing. I was still working at the time, so I was doing it in like every spare moment, sitting in front of and competing with some like good people. Some of these corporates and things have people whose jobs it is just to do procurement, and I really was out of my depth, but I stuck with it. And again, it's just down to like determination and hard work, just like I said.
And doing it and having a confidence. We have this thing we say when we used to work in a bank, or one of my banks I worked with years ago, there was this whole thing, for want of a better choice of words, it was about getting you to transfer your account from another bank to our bank. And basically you had a 1 in 10 hit rate. That's what the average was. But the answer, what they were saying, but it doesn't quite come in 1 in 10. They were saying, so you could ask 90 people and no one says yes, and then the next 10 all say yes, and you have to keep doing it. It's exactly the same with you. You could have stopped at number 9 because you were really, really fed up with the whole thing, and you'd have never have got number 10. Yeah. But you just showed that resilience to keep going and refining and trying. It's brilliant.
That's it, and I think that's like a lesson for anyone, for any business. Is you just got to keep going there and believe in yourself, believe that you'll get there.
That's brilliant.
What management structure do you have in place, Jeff? Because managing and running 19 practices is significant, and that's going to test all your energy, all your own resources. So how do you actually manage it? Are you still clinical at all yourself, or did you pack that up some time ago?
Sure. So I probably do like 1 day a month. And really, I do that just because I've got a few long-standing patients that I just couldn't give up. And also, I think it's good from the point of view of running the group to show dentists that, you're not just talking about it, but, I'm walking the walk. I'm talking
gives
the
you
talk
credibility and authority, I think.
Yeah.
That's it for sure. In terms of management, thankfully I work with some absolutely incredible people in the dental space. Big shout out to Michaela and Gary and Jane and Larry and the whole of the team, really. But we've got incredible people that work with us, and honestly, I'm blessed to have those people as part of the team. But even amongst that, we've got some great practice managers at practice level as well. So basically, the way our sort of structure works is we have our sort of like head office group of people, and effectively they are the ones that sort of like make the decisions about the trajectory of our group, and then the practice managers at practice level like implement those. In terms of how we are, I mean, obviously it's getting bigger. It's becoming, the dental design studio is becoming a bigger entity, so it does get more difficult for sure. I mean, for me, I'm always on it. I'm up at 4 a.m. and I'm in bed at like midnight, so I like literally am on it 24/7. Thankfully, I've got a very, very wonderful, supportive wife who just lets me get on with what I need to get on with. But also got an amazing relationship with our team. Like all the dentists have got my personal number. They ring me, they text me, not just about dental things. Sometimes they have marriage problems, sometimes financial problems, sometimes GDC problems. And the reality is I'm always there for everyone, irrespective of what happens, whether it's a dental nurse, a cleaner, a receptionist, whatever. If somebody needs me, I'll always make time to speak to them and deal with them. And in that respect, I suppose that's what's kept people loyal to our group and kept our workforce and kept us going. It is challenging, of course, and there are times when it can be quite disheartening. If you have a good associate who leaves or a manager who's good who leaves, you can't help but take it a little bit personally, because in a way it's like a breakup, isn't it? And but at the end of the day, you have to accept that in business, in when you're dealing with like hundreds of people, there are going to be people that come and go, and that's just the nature of it there. And when I look back, we've always had people working for us, and so where one person leaves, another person comes. And sometimes you don't want to let someone go, or you're sad that someone goes because you think that you won't find better. But sometimes you do find better. And sometimes somebody new joining the organization is actually a really good thing, because they bring in a new energy and a new sort of eyes on things. I mean, recently we've had a chief financial officer who joined us a couple of weeks ago. Never had one. Never really thought I needed one, to be truthful. And she's just come in with like a pair of eyes like you wouldn't believe. And she's like, every day she's sending me a list of like 2 pages of A4 questions for me to answer. But it's just like, it's incredible to see like other people's energy and vision and their drive and determination, and it's just great working with people who are like similar mindset, and that's something that in a way keeps me working hard. Larry, who's my partner in the business, he's a dentist, the co-owner of Dental Design Studio. He's like probably one of the hardest working people in dentistry. Nobody really like hears about him because he just quietly gets on with things, but he's in his 60s and he's still pushing it, and he's still working hard, and he's here, there, and everywhere. And when you work with people around you that are like really motivated and hardworking, in a way, it lifts your game. I suppose it's like if you play in a football team with really great players, it can't help but lift your game,
elevate
and
you.
that's how I kind of feel like that. That's it. I can't slack off because I'm working with people who will be surpassing me if I do.
Yeah.
So that kind of keeps me honest and focused as well.
Jeff, what are you like at delegation? Because you obviously started this with Larry from ground zero, and quite often people that are the founders, it's their baby. So stepping back and giving space for others isn't always easy. But you're of a size now where, you said you've recently just brought in a CFO because you get into that level. But for you to continue to have the success you're having, you obviously need to, and you probably have for a period of time now, needed to delegate. How was that process? Are you comfortable with delegation? Are you good at it?
Sure. So you know what, that I'm not brilliant at it. I've got to be honest with you. It's something that I've had to learn, and I'm learning. And the Dental Design Studio is now getting to the stage where it is of a size where I can't do everything myself. And as much as I try to do as much as I can, I can't do everything. And really, that isn't a problem. That is just really in my own mindset, just getting my head around the fact that you have to let go, and you have to trust people to do things, and you have to focus on the things that realistically only I can do. And so in that respect, it is difficult, and it is hard to let go of certain things, because your worry, of course, is always when you delegate something, that the person you delegate it to maybe won't do it as well as you, or with as much energy and enthusiasm and as intensely as you. And it is hard to do that. But at the end of the day, you have to do it, because the reality is otherwise you just completely consumed, and you'll never be able to move forward, because you're so busy focusing on just the minutiae of things really like that. It's not to belittle those jobs in any way, shape or form, but as like the clinical director or CEO or business owner, you have to focus on only the things that you can do. There's a lot of people that can order stock. There's a lot of people that can make rotas. There's a lot of people that can deal with payroll. The reality is the decisions about buying a practice or investing into another surgery, those are things that probably only a few people can focus on and make those decisions. And that's what you have to do. But it is hard. And, that is one area that I did find difficult, because I suppose I must be a bit of a control freak in my own self. And it's not because I'm egotistical or anything like that, but it's just that when you've started something so from nothing, in a way, like having a baby, when you've started it and you've nurtured something, you're so, in a way, desperate not for it to go wrong, and you want it to be thriving and looking after it the same way as it has done. And to let it go to someone else is difficult. It's exactly like having a baby. If you have a baby and you love that baby and you've nurtured that baby, and then you hand it over to the nursery and say, okay, here you go. You are like basically, you are handing over, in a way, one of your most precious things to somebody else's care. And that takes psychologically, it takes a lot to do that. Yeah. But in order to progress, you have to do that.
I can relate to that, can't we? We can relate to that.
Well, we've bought businesses and we've started businesses, and I think you're right. I think the ones you start, you probably do feel slightly different about than the ones you buy, because you inherit something that's already established, and you might morph it over a period of time into a shape that suits you, but it is different from those ones that you start, and it's a skill that is developed and acquired over a period of time.
We identified, didn't we, sort of not early on, because the business, we only had one, but as they all grew, we realised that we actually were becoming the bottleneck. Yeah. Because the answer is we only have a finite amount of time, and we're lucky because there's two of us. There's one of you, so you get to that point way quicker than we do, and we just realised that ultimately we're going to have to sort of relax a bit and recruit the right people, because otherwise we're just going to be restricted in our growth, won't we?
I think you were spot on, Jeff, when you said, where do I add value? What are the things that I need to do in the business, and what things can I delegate? Because we only have so many minutes and hours in a day.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you can focus on those few big decisions that are really going to springboard your business forward, that's where you add value. I think it was Jeff Bezos, they were talking to Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy, and they were saying, you must make thousands of decisions every day. Yeah, how do you cope with it? And he was like, I've got a lot of people working with me. I focus and prioritise trying to make one good decision a day. If I can make one good decision that's going to have an impact, and I can make that one decision a day, that's going to really springboard us forward. And I think that's kind of almost captures the true art of delegation. If you can create space so you can focus on the big decisions, the impact they have on your group will be much more significant than meddling in the smaller decisions, which arguably other people are a much better place to make those decisions.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that.
So just to take it a twist, you obviously quite enjoy getting in front of the camera on the media side of things, because you recently got involved in the ITV Tonight programme, Pulling Teeth, the End of NHS Dentistry. How did that come about?
Well, actually, it came out through social media. So anyone who sort of like follows me on Twitter knows I like to have a moan. And
don't we all?
The guy from ITV read my moans, and he sent me a DM and just said, we're looking at having this documentary about dentistry, and so would you be interested in taking part? And to be honest with you, I was happy to chat with him, but I wasn't that keen to take part in it because firstly, I didn't want to come across in any kind of negative way. The fact is we're helping a lot of people at our practices, and I didn't want it to be like, the greedy dentist is not seeing NHS patients or any of that sort of angle, and you never know what it could be. So that was firstly my bit of my concern. But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, actually, who better to say how it really is? and what we're all sort of experiencing in this industry than somebody who's like living and breathing it all the time. And so when I went and did the program, I was kind of like trying to do it as a sort of like, not so much about me in the dental design studio, but more about like as an advocate for the profession, really, like that there. And so actually the program was supposed to be on TV, but it actually got postponed because the day that it was supposed to air was when the Queen passed away, unfortunately. So it's actually it's been postponed for a bit, but I think by the time people see this podcast, it will have been on the TV. So hopefully people will have seen that and enjoyed it. But one thing that being on TV made me realize was definitely got to lose some weight and get in the gym and start getting a bit fitter, because watching yourself on TV is like it's like, wow, you can't hide from that. So
I think they say, don't they say the camera adds 20 pounds?
Yeah, it's right. The camera adds weight or something. Yeah.
But it was a really good experience, and seeing how like TV programs are made and the level of intricacy they go into, and like they can't just say like, oh, they can't just make a statement. They have to go and get everyone's opinions and research it and make sure that everything is factually correct. Because like I was having a moan about how to get a dentist to come from overseas, you have to pay for like a skilled workers visa, which is about £3,200. And so like the guy who was the researcher went to the Department of like to investigate that, to see, is that actually correct? Is the Home Office charging that? Is this right? And getting a statement from them. And so they did research it really, really well. But unfortunately, it's sad that we have to have these kind of programs, because really it's not a positive thing. And I always try and be a positive person, and it's not nice to have programs about negative things, and nobody wants to see patients who are like, pulling their own teeth out, or kids that can't get a dentist because there's no NHS accessibility and things like that. That's not really what, as dentists, we want to be sort of like associated with. We want to be associated with people who help, people who cure disease, people who improve people's health. And that's what we are sort of trained to do, and that's what we want to do. So, but it was a good experience being on
It'll be interesting
when it comes out. And I think the angle you've taken is smart, because, like you say, it is a delicate line to walk. There's a number of dentists who regularly appear in the media, and I think they're all incredibly sensitive about presenting the profession in the most positive light possible, but also being very truthful and aware about the issues, particularly around the delivery of NHS dentistry in certain areas. So it's a fine line to walk. So I'm sure you've done a great job.
Sure.
If not, you'll be abused on Twitter.
That's right.
In our intro, we also said something that you're obviously interested in crypto and Bitcoin, and you're sort of quite a pioneer. And I think Chris was saying that one of the things that you're looking to, you either have introduced or you will be introducing, is the ability for patients to pay with cryptocurrency. What's your kind of thoughts around what that whole new currency looks like? Will it feature in the mainstream of dentistry in the coming years?
Absolutely, 100%, definitely. That's one thing I say, mark my words. I definitely think that we're going to see in time dental practices accepting cryptocurrencies as form of payment. At the moment, not enough people understand it or know about it, but that certainly is absolutely a future thing. I'm absolutely convinced about that. I mean, to give you an example, and I always find with these things, it's best to just give like practical real life examples. If I was going to buy a practice, say for example, I wanted to buy a practice from you guys and you were charging £1 million for it. Okay, with cryptocurrency, I could send you £1 million to your wallet, your crypto wallet, within 30 seconds, and the cost would be about 20 pence. Okay. So you would have it there. I'm not going to demonstrate it by doing it. But
that's a shame. I was just thinking, that's very nice of you, Jeff.
But you would have that in your wallet in like less than a minute there. Now you imagine the banking process for that. If I wanted to, I'd have to prove to the bank where the money came from, anti-laundering. I'd have to probably pay a horrendous fee to do the bank transfer, like 35 quid or whatever like that, or I'd have to do it in certain increments because my bank only allows me to send a certain amount per time. And so in a way, that sort of like traditional banking is a very, very slow method and quite an expensive method as well. Whereas the ability to take cryptocurrency payments is an international thing. You imagine somebody in Australia, they're coming to London to have their teeth done. They can send cryptocurrency and pay for it straight away. It's there. Have you ever tried to send money to a different country? It's a real lengthy
painful
process. I sometimes see people in the post office, they're there showing their passports and they're doing MoneyGram or all these sorts of things like that. So I do see the cryptocurrency as definitely something that's going to become part of dental practices. It eliminates the charges, bank charges. It eliminates the sort of time waiting for money to clear. And the most beautiful part about it really is that it's very, very transparent. And what I mean by that is, if going back to the analogy of sending you £1 million, if I sent it to you, you can actually look on the blockchain and see when I sent it, and I can see that you've received it as well. So it's transparent. It's there on the public ledger that transaction has taken place. So for example, if I say to you, okay, yeah, I'm going to send you some money from my normal Barclays bank account or whatever bank I'm using, you don't know if I've sent it or not. You have to wait and see whether it comes or not. And you're relying on me saying that I've sent it. But if I don't send it for a few days, then you don't really know whether I've sent it or not. On the blockchain, you can see the time I sent it, and I can see, more importantly, that you've received it as well. So you can't come to me and say, listen, Jeff, where's the money? Because I can see that it's there. And that, in a way, is a complete different shift to what we have at the moment. I know it's still early days, and I know that there's a lot of ignorance about it, and people are a bit reluctant to accept these things because they don't truly understand it, or they may have read something in the newspaper that's kind of clouded their sort of view of these things. But the reality is, I do see this as being the future of not only dentistry, but a lot of different sort of professions and different sort of like way of life, really.
It'll be interesting to see how that develops and it evolves. You've clearly had massive success, Jeff. It's a tremendous story. Looking back over the success you've had, is there anything you'd go back and change if you could? Would you do anything differently if you did it again?
Sure. I would have. It's a good question, really, like that there. I mean, for me, the job's not finished, so it's still a work in progress. So I can't say, like, I never sit back and think, oh yeah, I've achieved whatever I've achieved, and it's a fait accompli. It's not. It's really a work in progress. I mean, I think there's been times when maybe I've been too trusting of people, and or I've been a bit soft on people, where especially like staff, I let them get away with things that maybe I shouldn't have done, or so. But at the end of the day, if I didn't do what I did, I wouldn't be where I am. And so all the things that I've done wrong, and there's been plenty of things, I've learned from those experiences, and that's kind of helped me to get where I am.
True.
I think probably in terms of things I would have changed is some of my clinical things, like clinical mistakes that I've made that I've learned from. But no one's perfect, and as you guys said before, you have to have a few stumbles along the way, and that's where you learn. So I think I would just try even harder. That's really, I think, what I would do if I look back and think maybe I should have tried harder earlier. and then maybe I would have more practices. Who knows, really? But
yeah, why
at the
wait
end
a
of the
year
day,
to set up your first practice in foundation dentistry? You could have done it straight away, Jeff. Come on.
I'm sure there'll be lots of people listening to this saying, wow,
Yeah,
if I could have half the success that Jeff's had, I'd be a very happy person.
People are going, a year? Well, you did a year.
we always finish up in the same way, Jeff. We always like to ask our guests the same two questions just to kind of get a theme of what's in their heads. And the first question we always like to ask, if you could be the fly on the wall with somebody in a certain situation, when would that be and who would you be with?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I suppose I think maybe to Thomas Edison. I don't know if you know much about Thomas Edison.
Yeah,
he was the guy who invented the light bulb. Great inventor, American figure. And I think that was like the real light bulb moment, the actual light bulb moment. And to sort of see that somebody creating that would have been an amazing thing, and something that has then gone on to sort of like revolutionize the world and impact on virtually every single human being's life in some way, the light bulb. So I think that to have seen that being invented and created would have been amazing.
That's a great one. We take it for granted, don't we? But you're right. Up until that point, there wasn't a light bulb. So to actually see light come out in that way. Because like now we just take it for granted. Light bulbs are everywhere. Everything's lit. We've got lighting that incorporates so much of our daily lives. But there was a time before Edison where the light bulb didn't exist.
It just made me think. I'm sorry, Jeff. It just made me think suddenly of exactly that. Of how that is so simple. Then I'm suddenly thinking, sitting where we're doing our podcast, I'm thinking, who invented doors? Because before you had a door, you had an entrance.
I really hope it was somebody called Ronald Draft.
Barry Door. But you're dead right. It's a real interesting one. I'd never really thought about it because you take it for granted. And I'm just looking at it and going, but who thought? I tell you what, I'll put a bit of wood over that. That would be much better.
That's a great answer, Jeff.
We have our own light bulb moments all the time, and in a way we're creating the light bulb ourselves with our thoughts and our deeds, really. So yeah.
No, very true.
Brilliant.
Very true.
Super link there, Jeff. Well done, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the last question we ask is,
exactly.
If you could meet anyone, given the opportunity, who would you like to meet?
Gosh, there's so many people, really. I think going back to my theology days, I would probably say somebody from the Bible. Probably like maybe Noah. I think Noah would be a good person because he was there building his ark, and people were like probably scoffing at him, saying, why are you doing this? And he's there getting on with it, building his ark. And then when it started raining, he's like, and that's why. So it's, I think that's the thing. So it's like sometimes I think it'd be good to speak to somebody who was like people were mocking them or didn't believe in them, and somebody who then carried on doing what they were doing, stood by the courage of their convictions, and in a way got the result there. And I think there's a lot of that people that have that kind of mindset I find very fascinating, really. People where they're up against sort of opposition of whatever kind that is, whether it be financial or just public opinion or the elements, and yet they succeed. And I think that kind of mentality is great. So I think going back to my Bible studies, Noah from the Bible would have been someone I would have liked to have had a chat to, just to see
Interesting.
Well, that's your mentality, really, isn't it? Because I can imagine when you said you were setting up a squat, even though it was with Larry, a lot of people went, "You're mad."
But also, I think very often visionaries see a future that nobody else can see, and they're absolutely committed to what this thing can become. But that's challenging because when nobody else can see it, you either sort of range from being an outlier to an outright nutter. Because you're so convinced about what this future looks like, but nobody else can see it. So you're on this path, And over time, you start to gather kind of support and followers and people that help you. And when it turns into a reality, people often look and go, well, yeah, but it's so obvious and it's so easy. But it wasn't when you were 1 year qualified as an associate and you set up a squat dental practice, and many years later you've got a group of 19 practices. I've kind of summarised your remarkable success in one sentence. But at the beginning, it wasn't so obvious. It's only in retrospect. It was,
McDonald's. I'm going to make burgers that all look the same.
Yeah,
that'd be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, that's
funny enough with McDonald's. I think of McDonald's a lot. I mean, firstly, I eat too many McDonald's, but secondly,
not after TV, you won't.
Yes, exactly. Going past, and they always used to put up like 44 million customers served, and I always thought that was like incredible how many people's lives they touched. And in a way, that's kind of how I feel with dentistry as well. That we touch a lot of people's lives through what we do, and you guys as well. Like facilitating people to buy practices, sell practices, and collectively as a profession, we touch and help a lot of people's lives, and that's something that we should be incredibly proud of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jeff, you've got a terrific story.
That's brilliant.
We
really
appreciate
good.
your time to find the time to talk to us, given that you've got all these plates that are spinning. But I think it's a really good story to be told. I think people will take enormous amounts from it. You're a very modest guy for the success you've had. You kind of tell this story in a very easygoing style, but there's just real terrific success that you've had, and like I say, I think there's a whole lot more to come. You're still a young guy. You've got a lot of years ahead of you, and I'm excited to see what they bring.
You're almost a bit under the radar, Jeff, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? I know you've got publications, but it's sort of almost, I wonder how many people really know the story of Jeff that you've allowed to tell us today, that you've been able to tell us today. It's fascinating, really, because people see you, hear you, and know this bit, but I wonder how much they truly know about you. A bit like us, really. We didn't know any of your backstory. It's bloody fascinating. It's really interesting.
No, thank you guys that's what I said, like right at the beginning. Thank you guys for having your podcast and for doing it and giving people an opportunity to tell their story and hopefully inspire some others and just sort of like cover things that we don't really see in dentistry like that so much. And so thank you so much for your time and for letting me run your podcast. Perfect.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate your time. Look after yourself. Cheers, Jeff.
Thanks very much,
Cheers,
Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.